I start pointing at the camera like that with my finger. That's our pretend that an awesome intro video is playing right now.
In my
And
opinion, it's the best introduction video ever.
yeah, and the best panel. We got John's Longbox, we got Jason, the creator of Jupiter, Jason Sandberg, and we got me, Pear, aka Narwhal. That's what I've been. I'm like, my name now is Pear, aka Narwhal. I don't say Pear. I don't say Narwhal. I've been signing books that to I go Pear, aka Narwhal.
That's a lot. That's you're giving people their
Yeah,
money's worth. That
it's like the era. This is the middle era. So there was the Narwhal era. There's Pear, aka Narwhal era, and then there's Pear era.
How long until you're the artist formerly known as Narwhal?
I know. I'm like Prince. That's not a bad comparison, I guess. Yeah. So that I literally will, but I don't want to have to sign that in a book. But that's hilarious, though. But yeah, so we got some fun plans for the show. We're gonna kind of just catch up and chill for a second while people filter in. We're gonna pimp John's new book, live on Fun My Comic, Heroic Tales 2, which we're excited to take a look at, and then we're talking Mr. X. We've all been reading it, and it's an awesome kind of inspirational book from the 80s, from the indie-ish scene kind of thing. And there's the co-creator of Mr. X is kind of around on Twitter, and he's Rocket Fiction on Twitter, and he's a good guy, and his name is Paul. He's going to come on in like a half an hour, and he'll be able to give us more details or more stories or whatever, answer questions and tell us more what's going on. So yeah, how have you guys been? I haven't talked to you in a while. How are you doing, John? You go first.
I'm doing great. I can't complain about anything. Just working, making comics, and keeping out of trouble.
You
John,
posted a picture on Twitter that you said you were like 200 stories underground in New York City.
Right now, I'm only a story or two below. Like, I work in Manhattan. I'm a construction worker. For those of you who don't know, I'm an electrician. And in the 30s, they passed a law that all the power lines had to be underground because a snowstorm brought power lines down and people would get electrocuted. You know, there was blackouts and everything. So now, throughout Manhattan, there's tunnels that connect everything, all power lines. So every building is, you know, if you get access to the tunnels, you could get like into any building. That's where I am. But 6 or 7 years ago, I was working way below the subways. You know, Manhattan is as deep as it is tall. You know, that Chris Claremont Morlocks living in the tunnels, they really exist. The only people deeper than me that are sandhogs. They drill to make water. So, you know, Manhattan is based on bedrock, but they drill through that and have a reservoir underwater. So they were lower than me, but they need air, they need filters, they need, you know what I mean? So that's what we would do, maintaining the tunnels. It was really cool. I mean, it was like being in Khazad-dûm in the Lord of the Rings, just staircases carved out of rocks, you know, lights just drilled into the walls. And then I put the picture up, just the stairwell going up. And when I went up there was just a chain door they said it's been locked for about 100 years.
Yeah. That's so awesome. That gives me goosebumps. You know, that kind of reminds me of, I bet everyone says this, but it's like Dark Souls. You know, did you ever play that video game or hear people talk about it?
I heard that's the game. They said they turned it on, hit play, and they're dead.
Yeah. But it's like, yeah, there's just like caverns and exploration and just like, yeah, stairways to nowhere to locked rooms and stuff like that.
John, I think you should. I've been watching your these photos you've been posting, and I think you should do like an 8-page ashcan photo book, 8.5 by 5.5, like a zine of these photos, and just make it an add-on for the campaign.
Oh wow, that's a good idea.
I think that'd just be fun. Just one of those things where they live, you know, they live forever. And
it would have been perfect now because this issue of Heroic Tales, the patriarch goes below Science City, and he's dealing with a villain called the Subterranean. Man, but that is a good idea. Maybe, you know, next campaign.
And I think it's very timely because like Mr. X, you've got all these secret passages through the city. So I like that too.
Yeah, when we get into the Mr. X, I was super excited to do this because this comic is super influential on my comic to the point where I have to ask Paul Rivoche permission for a couple of things.
Nice. I have a feeling it's influential on a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll talk about that too. But yeah, Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I am coming out of a 7-month sprint at work. But 7 months ago, my boss He's a group president at the company I work for. I report directly to him. He rang me up and he said, "Hey, we're going to consolidate these two plants in Minnesota." And I said, okay. And from that point until now, I've been working 6, 7 days a week, 10 to 14 hours a day, just getting everything to dovetail and to work and to click. And the plant consolidation was effectively completed April 1st. So now I'm taking this deep breath and I'm finally getting around to working on Jupiter 2. Get in earnest, right? I've been nibbling at it, but finally my schedule's freed up. I'm inking issue 2 of Jupiter and kind of just enjoying the spring here in Minnesota. But the last 7 months, it has been like tunnel vision, just plowing through, getting all these, getting everything to fit together and getting this plant consolidation to work. So I just I feel good. I'm a little bit tired, but it's good to be able to finally get back to the art and then obviously hang out with you guys. This is a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, that's good timing that your stuff freed up. Yeah, just a few weeks ago. Now we're getting rolling again. Yeah, and for me, I have Vatican City's coming out. That was a long, like, I nose to the grindstone, keep my head down kind of, and now I can kind of just reap the dopamine for a few months here, I think. But I'm still working too on comics, got projects going and everything. But yeah,
very exciting. And any inkling yet whether or not there's going to be a hardcover collection of Vatican City or will it be soft cover? Like, what are the numbers telling you? What are the rumors, or is it too early to talk about a collector?
Yeah, I'm scared to ask about numbers. I know if I think they know how many orders they got or whatever, and I have the emails I could ask them. Yeah. But yeah. So if it sells 50,000, then I get a bonus.
Nice.
And just within my bubble, a lot of people are it's doing great. I'm like, yeah, but how big is my bubble, and what about outside the bubble? Because you still don't really know. But we'll see. But one thing I'm thinking, and I'm hoping my little manifestation kind of thing is, I think issue 2 is going to sell more than issue 1. That's always good if it's kind of growing. Mm-hmm. And same for 3, because it's a short little, fun little firecracker story, yeah. But it builds tension really well. The script's really fun and really unpredictable. So I think issue 2 is actually going to blow minds, get people talking a lot. Issue 1, a lot of people were talking about the art. And a lot of the writing, sometimes people are like, yeah, the writing's great. It's like they just expect that from Mark. They're just like, it's great. Right. They don't even talk about it.
Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed issue 1. I like the way it suddenly at the end turns into a heist film. And I can imagine this is eventually going to be a movie. It's so the story is so good and it's got everything. So I'm very happy for you, very proud of you, young man.
Yeah.
This is just fantastic. So, and
I've been avoiding spoilers because I pre-ordered it, but my comics come once a month, so I didn't get it yet. So I just got one question: do the vampires sparkle, or do they not sparkle?
Oh yeah, they do not sparkle, except for just a glint of light off the blood when they're sucking your blood. But yeah.
And the swords. There's some sword play in there too.
Nice.
Yeah. Cool. So real quick too, we're going to tease this. We're going to talk about this later before Paul comes on. So we'll talk about this in like 15 minutes. But Heroic Tales 2, John's going to give us the rundown on this. It's doing well, off to a good start. Issue 1 was a pretty great standout indie comic from, was it last year that it launched, or was it before that even?
I shipped it in November. So I launched the campaign in July and I shipped it in November. And this is on track to actually be early. So
cool. So yeah, so you're fitting in 2 in 1 year, which is really good pace.
Yeah. I want to try to step it up. Renzo is my artist, is finished with a lot of commitments. So we're just gonna. I'm already about to send him the script for my next comic. He's about 60% done with this comic right now. So
cool. Yeah, and Renzo's great. And did you say your next comic is something different?
Well, I'm going to follow up this campaign with the Patriarch #1. I'm spinning the Patriarch off into his own comic.
Okay.
I have another comic in the works called Eddie is Doomed, and that's like my love letter to this era of what we're talking about now. I call that Love and Rockets meets Crisis on Infinite Earths. But Renzo's not drawing that, so I got Tonic Mole, who does Saving the Universe, or Saving the World rather. He's drawing Eddie's normal life, and we got Oscar Carano. He's drawing the superhero story. So there's, you know, two stories going on. It's about a 35-year-old man child who his father's retiring and he has to move out of his house.
So it's about me. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And Eddie didn't do as well as you.
Oh yeah.
Eddie was doomed. But this comic, Heroic Tales, is a full-on love letter to Bronze Age Marvel comics. You know, like I try to imagine this coming out with Chris Claremont and John Byrne's X-Men and George Perez on the Fantastic Four and things like that. You know, with a little bit of the way I describe this comic, it's superheroes plus Dungeons & Dragons with a little dose of H.P. Lovecraft sprinkled on top. So
Cool.
there'll be conspiracy theories, superheroes, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, I love the idea of just having kind of multiple books going at once. That's kind of what I do, and I like when other people do it too. Yes. So yeah, Heroic Tales though is the book of the hour, and it looks great. Everyone, feel free to back it now while we're
Please
talking.
do, yeah.
We'll update it at some point, and so it's at 63. I can't remember if My Comic updates automatically, but if I refresh and it doesn't go up, then an angel dies, so it has to go up.
That's right.
So yeah,
So save the angels, yes.
Yeah. So and right now there's 14 people watching. Thanks everyone for being here. A few more people might filter in as we're chatting, and I'm hoping this interview might get a lot of views after the fact too.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure to promote it because we got Paul coming on talking about Mr. X.
Yeah.
So yeah. So Mr. X and John, you have the hard copy.
Yeah.
Jason, do you have a hard copy on you too?
Yep, I've got the floppies, and I continued collecting it into the era where Seth was the artist. I didn't keep those. I only kept the first four by the Hernandez brothers. But this was a fantastic title. It was a favorite of mine. Read it many times, and it kind of speaks to what it speaks to what independent comics can be and were in the early 80s, mid 80s. Because before Image, this is the first comic I remember that had the satin paper. It wasn't newsprint. Nexus was like Baxter paper. This had a sheen to it. And then also, we'll have to ask Paul when he gets on if they intentionally. I mean, it makes sense the character is Mr. X because he's a man of mystery. But did they go with the X to get the X-Men fans to pick it up? Because there's always that knee-jerk reaction. If there was an X in the title, people would buy it back in the early 80s. But it's a fantastic title because it wasn't a Kate book. It wasn't a sci-fi book necessarily. It was a bit of a mystery book, a bit of a espionage book. And it had all these other elements that you didn't find in like mainstream comics. So it always had a soft spot in my heart, and so I'm looking forward to digging into it with you guys.
Cool. Yeah, and then John, were you flashing? You have the multiple
everything by Mr. X.
Wow,
I'm a
wow.
crazy person. If I like something, I got to get it all. So here you go.
Nice.
Every bagged, aborted, sorted.
So
person behavior.
John, help me out. How many the Vortex series, how many issues did it go? Did it go like 17, 18 issues? Do you recall?
I got to do some counting. The Vortex.
Because Seth came on and I think he did 5 or 6 that I recall, and kind of had this kind of Art Deco art style.
It looks like 13 issues of Vortex.
Okay.
And then
yeah. So I have a question kind of for you guys to get started is noticed the behind the scenes seems like it's rich with lore because there's multiple names that come up, and one, we're having Paul on, and so there's Jamie and Gilbert Hernandez, there's Dean Motter, there's Paul Rivoche. I think Dean Motter and Paul, I read like Dean Motter did a little intro and it was him and Paul developing it.
Correct. And
it sounded like he said it had hype before it even released. And
yes.
And so how did that work?
I got this the Wednesday that I went to the comic book store. I'm not going to say the day it came out, but my friend Philip Manning, who dresses like Mr. X every year because he looks exactly like Mr. X. So it's his favorite character. But he was into the Hernandez brothers, and he told me, you got to get this comic, Mr. X. He knew about it before he came out. And I don't need to be twisted. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, I need to pick up this comic book. I'll pick up this comic. And I remember I went that Wednesday, picked it up among the many comics, went to the White Castle like I always do, and sat and read it. And Hernandez brothers really didn't ring a bell to me at this point. I got into Love and Rockets because of this comic. He got into Love and Rockets and then got into this. And I just remember reading it. And the thing that struck me was there was nothing like this. Nothing like this. Like I was just riveted by the first time I've ever been riveted. I was a kid, by the background details and the setting, because in the first issue, you don't really know much about Mr. X. It's planned. He's a mystery. So it's all side characters telling stories, and they have a little bit of his story. So it's conflicting details. Who is this guy? What's going on? But like you said, the Art Deco and the designs, to me, that was the true star of the comic. I just was like, at the time I'm reading Justice League, Fantastic Four, and and now Mr. X. And it's funny, I've been reading this for 40 years. I never thought of X-Men.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask them if they got any kind of like cease and desist letter at any point and maybe like laughed it off.
Well,
I don't remember. I mean, I think this was the first title by Vortex. Famously, after this, Vortex would do The Black Kiss by Howard Chaykin and Yummy Fur. And so when you look at it, pound for pound, Vortex might be, might be one of the most influential indie publishers, maybe comparable to Eclipse in terms of the impact of the number of titles they released. I don't know when I first saw this. I think I may have picked up the trade. They collected the first 4 issues as a trade. I may have picked it up there, and then I began to pick up the monthlies. But what was enchanting to me was that the Hernandez brothers, like out of the gate, just like immediately out of the gate, they're firing on all cylinders, right? They drop you right into this world, and you're and at first you're like, well, is this a story about some mobsters? He's trying to get revenge on a mobster.
What is the story?
Yeah.
And then you got this world where it's kind of like kind of 60s retro, but there's flying cars and robots. You're like, what's going on here? And then one of the great throwaway lines in this first issue, which is just like, when you think about it, it was written in the mid 80s. There's a TV show called Celebrity Autopsies. And it's like, oh my God. I mean, it's like these people were predicting reality TV and how crass it could become,
right?
40 years later.
Yeah, right there. It's right. It's in the second panel on the second page. Yeah. So, I got the latest Celebrity Autopsies on TV. That's boring.
It's wild. And so your brain's trying to figure out, okay, when does this take place? What's going on? And then as you get into it, you encounter Mr. X, and you're like, what's his motivation? What's going on with him? And why is he able to like vanish and reappear and things like that?
Does he have powers? Is he a superhero? Is he, what's
But is he a vampire? Is he an assassin? You don't know.
Yeah. The first 4 issues, I kind of, at first I didn't know what it was doing, and I liked that. And then I was like, okay, it's like a tapestry. Like there's a lot of lore, there's a lot of backstory, all the relationships, and they're just kind of revealing it as they go. So by the time you get through 4 issues, you kind of have an idea of like why he left, what happened. He built the city, he left. He was in like some kind of rehab-ish kind of thing, laying low, met the girl. But then he goes back because he hears that his partner supposedly committed suicide.
4 issues, and you still don't really know this. To me, my favorite, the selling point was the charm of just like, this was just character driven story. There was really no plot. Mr. X. Recovered.
It's like my favorite thing about it is like a criticism almost too, is like, wait, what is he trying to do?
Right. What is he trying to do? Like, what? But
so
You
are
can
we
get
are
away with
we
that when it's Mr. X, when it's Mr. Mystery. You know what I mean? Like, if this was Batman, I want to know what Batman's plot is. What's the motivation? What's going on? But this is Mr. X. I didn't mind the mystery. Sometimes I'll give you some leeway if you come up with like a hook like that.
and so this is for those of you I'm going to say a few things. So if you don't want this story spoiled, don't listen for the next minute or so. But what's interesting about this is that he's a hero. He's a hero because he's got to right a wrong that he committed earlier, right? Where the way the city was designed was causing people to go crazy, mental illness. So he's trying to rectify that. He's trying to rectify. He's trying to make right a
Right.
past wrong, right? That's it. Like that's the central motivation. And it's such a unique take, right? It's not like my parents were killed by a mugger. I didn't stop the mugger and he killed my uncle. It's this this kind of modern. It's a very modern story to wake up and realize this you've got this existential guilt about something you did, and you're gonna stay up all night if you have to get it fixed.
Literally
And
stay up all night.
literally stay up all night. And it wasn't until later that I noticed that almost all the story happens at night. There's almost nothing during the day. Did you notice that?
Yeah, everything's
Yeah.
spotlight. That just
Yeah.
that adds to the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I read one issue and I asked you guys because I knew you'd know, but I was like, did this influence Batman the animated series? And you were both like, absolutely. And that's when you mentioned Paul Rivoche, yeah,
Yeah.
who's coming on here in a little bit. We're gonna
Yeah,
have him on.
he worked on the designs. That's one of his things is he does like cityscapes designs. You know, he's so talented.
Yeah, but yeah, the look that struck me is the look is very timeless. It aged super well, obviously very influential. One thing I noticed is trying to think like eh, the like 99% of the panels it's straight up and down vertical. So they'll do perspective wise, they'll do 2 point perspective or isometric or whatever, but they will never do 3 point. The vertical lines will always be totally parallel, totally vertical. You can see this is the one panel where it's not like that. But so if I go through a few, you can see like, yeah, vertical, 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 vertical. Where, you know, if you use a little wider lens or whatever, tilt the camera, those vertical lines become not parallel, and a lot of people will draw that way, but it's like a design choice to keep it always perfectly vertical. And I really like it. It kind of reminded me, I was like, was Watchmen like that? But it can create a rhythm. It's the kind of thing like if the whole book is like that, it casts a spell over you, and it's amazing. But you might not notice if it's just one. If it's just one panel, it might even be like which decision is the right to do for like what perspective to pick or whatever.
Would you call like I just call this retrofuturism the way it looks? You know, it looks like it's from the 40s, but like you said, they got robots and blimps, and you know,
Yeah, and that's like Batman the Animated Series kind of has that feel too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like an early Gotham.
Hey, Jose Garcia's here. How you doing? Jose did one of the covers for my comic. Phenomenal artist.
Nice, Jose. What's up, man?
So one of the things
I love the gangsters that they have the thin mustaches. Like they might as well be working around a shirt that says gangster. You know.
Yeah.
I know that the Hernandez brothers had like a wealth of development material from Dean Motter and Paul, like basically set designs and aesthetic choices. So, and I've seen some of the preparatory drawings that were done, but when people look at this, they're like, okay, I get. You mentioned earlier the vertical lines and the 1 and 2 point perspective, which you'll find in like a regular issue of Love and Rockets.
Right.
But I think that you can tell that I think they were obviously given the Bible for this story in this universe, and I think and we'll see what Paul says about how faithfully they stayed to it. But it's interesting to see what happens if you pass them a baton of this world that's kind of prefab, what they do with it, and how much of it looks like Love and Rockets versus looks like something looks like Mr. X as as the creators designed it. It's an interesting kind of little experiment. One thing I did notice is that it was good for it was very it was it was interesting to note that all the robots are kind of like useless. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah.
Like, how can I help you? I'm here to help you, and like I can't do that. And
Nobody likes them either.
Nobody
Like,
likes
I just want to talk to a human. Even Mr. X is like that.
When we
Yes.
talk about the design, like I read this as it came out, and then it didn't adhere to a monthly schedule. They even talk about that in the letters page. I don't know. Do you get the letters pages in your collection?
No, I don't think I got those.
That's the first thing that. Sorry about the scheduling error. The length of time. It took forever. Like to the point when Mr. X showed up, I was like, Mr. X is out. A lot of these '80s independents had a lot of problems keeping on schedule, so they would talk about that. But again, that was like the only time I read. This is the first time I'm going back to reread this, and it seemed very theatrical. Like doesn't like that scene of him walking into the bedroom right there. Doesn't that look like a stage?
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's not a movie set. That's a stage set. Like, and then all the spotlights coming down from the airships and the robots. It's like I just feel like for me anyway, I think comic books up until the 80s, and around the 90s, they started changing from like a theatrical feel to a cinematic feel. Like like if you read old Will Eisner's The Spirits, like I just got the feeling that the spirit was running around on a stage, and this invisible stagehands were moving the sets around as Denny.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that, and it's funny because cinematic, that's more like my era growing up. I remember like the 2000s, early 2000s.
Right.
And it that word has gone from such like thought of in high esteem to kind of being low esteem. I think like people kind of don't want to do cinematic anymore in comics because they're sick of it. And but yeah, so it's a good idea to almost conceptualize it as a stage, or just thinking of the ways that comics can be separate from movies and embracing that more rather than like trying to be movies.
I mean, I can't explain why I get that feel. I'm not an artist. You two guys are. Maybe you could eloquently explain, but it just feels theatric to me. Like I would go to an artsy fartsy theater and watch a Mr. X play, but the Ultimates, that is something you go get popcorn, sit down in the movie theater and watch, on a big screen. I'm happy to see this on a off Broadway play or something.
Let's pause real fast because there's still plenty to talk about, and
Sure.
Paul will be here in a second. But so yeah, now is the time to pimp Heroic Tales comic book number 2. So John, do you want to tell us a little bit about Heroic Tales and tell us about issue 2 as well?
Sure. Issue 2 obviously is the second issue of my series. Heroic Tales was my love letter to what I call blue sky superheroics, meaning feel good superhero comics. The good guys are good. So I came out of the gate with the character called the Patriarch, and the Patriarch is like everything positive about males. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a beloved superhero, and there's nothing like mischievous about that. Like he loves his wife, he loves his kids, he wants to. I wanted him to be the positive father figure of superheroes. I got tired of everybody bashing fatherhood in comic books. So he's the head of a family. So I kind of extend that into Science City. That's the Science City is directly inspired by Radiant City in this comic. I mean, the people are going crazy in Science City because of the architecture too. That's perfectly. I talked to Paul Rivoche about that when he was on my channel, but for different reasons. And he's the father of the city. He goes if you see, he shows up in the first panel and he doesn't beat up the villain. He talks them down because a good dad doesn't just want to come in and start crushing everybody. And people reacted to that. They're like, yeah, I like the idea of he approaches superheroics like a father would. So my vision of the comic was every issue was going to have a different superhero. And people like, no, but we like the Patriarch. So what I decided to do is I'm making a flip book. So half the book is the Patriarch, full complete story. Half the book is a new character called Mary Sue. And now I'm playing every time you make a female character, everybody's like, oh, she's a girl boss. She's the best. So I'm like, I'm going to beat you right to the punch. I'm calling her Mary Sue, right on the nose. She's, the tagline for her is, where do you go when you're already perfect? So she's the perfect girl, and then she gets godlike powers, but there's consequences to having godlike powers. So you get 2 complete stories, and the Patriarch has reacted so well that I'm going to spin him off into his own comic. So my next campaign will be the Patriarch #1, and that'll have his origin. And then Heroic Tales 3 is going to introduce another superhero, and then Mary Sue. And then I'm going to keep going like that. Patriarch, Heroic Tales, Patriarch, Heroic Tales. And then I have another line of one-shots that are coming out, maybe a year from now. There you go. There's Jose Garcia's cover.
Oh, yeah, Jose, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I only kind of realized this recently. I was telling some people about it, but for the longest time, I didn't like Superman because I was like, he's just too powerful. It's boring. He can beat anyone. But then I was watching some original Star Trek original series, and then like some stories in the Bible are almost kind of like this, but where it's like, oh, someone who's all powerful, you can tell stories about them where it's actually the hardest shit ever that they have to deal with because they're trying to keep everyone happy, kind of, like
Right, a lot of expectations.
yeah,
The Patriarch is an homage to Superman. Now, he's a lot weaker. Like people always say, like, what happens if the Patriarch was to fight Spider-Man? I think Spider-Man would beat the Patriarch. He's a different power set, but he's filling the same niche as the inspiration for other superheroes. Like there's other superheroes in my world that aren't as good as him, and when the Patriarch shows up, we got to behave, kind of thing. Is my cape on straight? I want him to be like, when your dad shows up, no, Dad, we're not doing anything wrong. No,
yeah.
he does not want to be single. He's married and cool, except his kids. His kids bust his chops, but that's the way kids are.
Yeah.
This would be his perfect day. This is literally the next day after issue 1. He was kind of beat up, so he's telling his wife, I'm going to stay home today. I'm taking a day. And she's like, oh, good. I'm going to go take a shower. I'll come out. I'll make breakfast. We'll wake the kids. We'll spend the day with the kids. So here she is. I'm going to tastefully put a little bit of word balloons over that. Renzo made it a little bit more explicit than I wanted, but he likes to draw his sexy ladies.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's intriguing. The imagery that she's got, like half her body is scarred or whatever.
Yes,
that's cool.
That'll be explained probably in Patriarch #2. So now what he did was he turned on the news while he was just sitting there waiting for his wife in the shower, and he's a superhero. Something's going on, he and she understands. Yeah, she's disappointed, but it's not like, I can't believe you left me to save somebody's life. She's a good one.
Yeah.
See,
cool.
now,
and you said this was one where he goes underground.
Yeah. So yeah, a little boy fell into a sinkhole. So he's been missing for 18 hours. So that's the mayor. He was in issue #1. There was a story called The Suit. He literally, if you read issue #1, you'll see that there's devils involved to become a politician, because that's the way I feel about politicians. And he's been talking crap about the Patriarch for 18 hours. Where is he? If he was only, what is he doing? So right here, he's saying, what have you been doing that's more important than this? And the Patriarch's like, well, he can't say what he was doing.
Yeah.
And that's Regina Lopez. She's like my Lois Lane character. If you read Jason, you read issue #1, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. You know that there's a story about her. Mm-hmm. I don't want to spoil it. And she's been defending. Oh, he'll be here. She's got her own story, and now he's using he has like heightened senses. He doesn't have X-ray vision. He can literally, like, almost like Doctor Strange, send his presence elsewhere. And he's like,
hey, by the way, guess who's here? Paul Rivoche.
Rivoche, yes. Hello, everybody.
How you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. It's an honor, sir.
Yeah, good to have you. Thank you so much for coming on.
So I'll just finish this up then quick. So now he has to go down to rescue the kid because they can't send the machines down, stuff like that. This sinkhole will collapse. It's too fragile. So that's where he encounters the subterranean. I'm trying to introduce that there's things below the city that people don't know about. So that
sounds awesome. That's exciting. Yeah. So everyone take a look at this original art too. There's art looks amazing. That looks really great.
I got Renzo original art.
Yeah. So we're going to keep talking with Paul about Mr. X, but just everyone know the links in the description for this tonight. We're kind of pimping John Lombox's new comic book, Heroic Tales #2 here. #1 was kind of a smash hit from Q4 2024. So he's going fast, which is awesome too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm
Yeah, so hold on. I think I can click this button. And then we can see people a little bit bigger. How's it going, Paul?
Oh, it's going good. No, it's kind of I've been listening to what you guys have been talking about, so it's kind of like a trip down memory lane, right?
Yeah.
I'm back in the 1980s.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you Canadian? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, I'm actually dual citizen. I'm American Canadian. I was born in the USA, like the song.
Okay.
So then parents moved to Canada back in the 60s.
Cool. Yeah. Canada has a long tradition of like geniuses, I guess, like great comedians, great musicians, good comic people. So that's cool. It's because you guys are oppressed. So it makes it hard.
Yeah, well, the famous thing is people always emigrate to the USA, like William Shatner, and I don't know, there's a whole lot. Who is it? Like Ryan Reynolds, or is he?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he is, yeah.
All the Ryans.
The one I always think of is Norm Macdonald. He's Canadian. He's awesome.
Right.
But yeah, so I have some questions about like even who did what at what issue. So at issue 5, is that Dean Motter becomes the writer? Is that correct, you guys? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, there's for Mr. X fans, there's a whole long kind of complicated / torturous history of the project. It's one of these things that was like great promise, but kind of what's the right adjective? Ill-starred or something, because different people came on at different times, and like you were talking about how Vortex was kind of an incubator. Mm-hmm. So really this project was too, because for example, at one point, Seth, who's like an indie cartoonist, well known. So he drew some of the issues. Like I was on it developing it. We can talk about all this. I mean, you asked me, but I mean, there's so much I could say, like I said to you in my message. But we developed it, and then for a lot of complicated reasons, I left. And then Jaime Hernandez drew it, and the Hernandez brothers worked on it. See if I can get the order right. And then there was a whole bunch of other people at various points, like Seth, and there was one done by Ty Templeton's friend. His name's not coming back to me at the moment, but and then the Hernandez brothers, they did I think a few issues. They had some kind of problems. And I guess you maybe Jason, if you know the order better. I think it was like after that Seth did a whole bunch. Yep. And then there's a bunch of different people, and eventually what happened is, much more recently, Dean Motter did his own like newer versions of it, and those were published in a compilation through Dark Horse Archives. So yeah, it's had a whole long history.
Yeah.
So,
question for you.
Official creator of is it? I was always under the impression that it was you and Dean Motter are the creators, and the Hernandez brothers were kind of just like hired guns.
Yeah, let me turn my sound up because I didn't want to get the echo. My sound's okay?
Yeah, you sound fine.
You sound good.
Okay, good. Well, so John, you're asking about who was the creator?
Yes.
That goes right to the heart.
Yeah.
It's going to get us into drama.
So there was drama even back then. In a way, that's good to know, I guess.
What, that there was drama? Oh, yeah. It just wasn't televised.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was before Twitter. There would have been hits, and everybody would have hated each other, and
It wasn't televised and monetized. It just all happened privately. But no, what happened was, I mean, again, there's the long version, but I'll try and do the TLDR. I had moved to Toronto from Ottawa, which is Canada's, government town. So I was like, it's like the classic Go West young man story, the green kid. I was like 18, go there. And eventually after being the so-called dropout out of university and attempting to go to art school for a year, which I also just left, I got a great job. I mean, it was like a reversal of fortune. So I got this great job working in animation at Nelvana, working on Rock and Rule. So I did that for about a year and a half.
What? You worked on Rock and Rule? That's amazing.
Yeah, I did. I guess probably it's fair to say the majority of the key background designs and even
Cool.
some of the layouts. So I was just a kid, though. I was like 20 or whatever when on Rock and Rule. And then by the time that ended, you know, I was looking for the next thing because kind of the story with Nelvana and Rock and Rule is its own long and complicated thing. But I could see that it kind of was sinking, like the ship was taking on water as a project. But it was a very noble effort, the film. But and I was also like personally, like, I don't want to stay here. I need to develop. I need to get out there. It's like that youthful energy. So what happened was Dean Motter had been doing this work. Like, he was an art director at CBS Records up here in Canada. That was kind of his day job. And he also had his own private design studio doing album covers, which he eventually left and just did that full time. But he had this side thing where he had done some paintings. And one of them was this enigmatic painting of this guy he called Mr. X. And he had done it in front of kind of an Art Deco building. And I really liked it. And so at some point, in the misty past, we shared a studio. And I walked in this one day and they said, he said, like, we're trying to do a comic of this. Do you want to work on it? And it kind of dovetailed because I had spent a year at this animation company, or a year and a half actually, maybe even getting on for 2 years. And I would go at night to this shared studio I had with Dean Motter and other people, because Dean worked at the daytime as an art director, like I said, at CBS Records. At night, he would go to the studio. I did the same thing. Yeah, young energy, like I said, and I was kind of working all the time. Just, it's the whole thing where you're trying to get somewhere. I mean, it was the 80s. There was nothing in comics. There was like, it was a whole different time. So, yeah, suddenly it morphed into like, well, Paul's going to draw this comic. So I spent, but when I looked at it, like after the mentality of working on this big feature with a lot of talented people who were working on the storyline of Rock and Rule and developing it and doing layouts. And I was in a very sort of, I don't know what the word is, an analytical mentality maybe. I wanted to develop it in the way that you would as a feature, you know, like it had to have a story. So when I looked at what Dean had, they had very little. Like, it was a character. There was no real story, except I think back then, and you know, it's a bit foggy because you'll forgive me, it's a long time ago, but I think he basically had it like he was a detective and he was this dark figure, and he was even a drug addict, and he'd be injecting like this drug under his fingertips. And I'm not like a big guy on the totally negative. Like I've said that before on my ex or whoever's watched my videos. I'm just not, I just hate all that totally dark stuff. Now, darkness as a thing can be good because, of course, you need that. But when it becomes too much, there's a sort of a tipping point, right?
Yeah.
I agree.
So I like heroes. I guess I'm now going to be considered old school.
Me too.
But yeah, so, but even back then as a kid, I was like, this is way too dark. I don't like this. And it doesn't interest me. So I call myself now the co-creator because I was the co-creator. I didn't have much to do with the later stuff, and I would never take credit for that because I'm not that guy. Like, I don't want credit for something I didn't do. But I did spend like a year and a half very intensively working on it. I was working on the poster campaigns, doing all sorts of drawings, working on the Art Deco side of it, the look of it, the vehicles, the way his costume looked. Like, I started from what Dean had done, but then I kind of refined it. And again, coming into it with an animation sensibility, because I had seen people, like I'd learned so much in the time I was at Nelvana, seeing how they did model sheets, turnarounds. And that's what I meant when I said the analytical mentality. It's like you're planning it out so it's a real, believable world. And I always loved that. When I look at the stuff I loved growing up, you know, Disney, and even now, like Studio Ghibli, I think the appeal is you've got great characters and human interaction, but you've got this fully fleshed out world that you can dive into, and it's consistent. So that's what always appealed to me, even back then. They had been working on that on Rock and Rule, and I tried to bring that into Mr. X, the project, and I kind of pushed. You know, I said, like, I'm, you know, the whole thing about him being an architect in the city, that came from me pushing
Okay.
back on Dean, saying, I don't want him to just be like a detective. That's just too expected.
Yeah.
He can be a detective in his activities, and he should be mysterious. But why is he doing all this? What's the backstory? So the whole thing about psychitecture, which is what they called the effect of the malign effect of the city on people, that came from me talking to him after I'd been reading these design books, because I was actively studying, like, drawing and devouring everything I could. And I had read this book called Form, Space, and Order by an architect called Francis K. Ching. And he did these very beautiful drawings. And in one part of it, he was talking about the effect of space and form on people as applied to architecture. And we even know that from things like Will Eisner's books, where he talks about, panel shapes affecting, like, if you have a big panel and a tiny little figure at the bottom, you have loneliness because above it there's space. Or if you have a close-up, it has a different effect than a distant shot. So it's kind of that thing. I guess I'm going on here, but this is probably answering.
This is great, because
on.
I gotta say, my intuition, having observed your other work, my intuition was always that you breathe the world into the Mr. X. You breathe the Art Deco style and the architecture, and it sounds like that's kind of what you brought to the table. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm very careful to be as precise as I can. Like the basic elements were there, in the sense that Dean had drawn in this one painting. It was used on an album cover, I think, for a guy called Patrick something, Megatron Man, I think it was called. But he used his own painting, which he had done as a development thing, or noodling around at night or whatever. But then he also used it on an album cover. And what it showed, like I said, was Mr. X in front of a very Art Deco building, and it had searchlights behind it. And that was the genesis of kind of the rest of it. So I guess what you could say fairly is he had some of those elements. I just came in and helped him elaborate it. Like, he didn't want to draw the whole comic book. He didn't really have the experience. And he had been doing stuff, but I guess he just wasn't interested. Like, he was running a design studio full time, and he didn't want to give that up. So I came in and I basically used that as a springboard and developed all this stuff. And so I wouldn't take sole credit for the idea that Mr. X has Art Deco.
But that became the cornerstone of the comic, like the city itself, the fact that he's an architect and like the city itself is causing madness, like turning that and creating that's to me is the whole charm and heart and soul of this comic. There's nothing else like it. And I don't know if you remember when you were on my channel, I said pretty much I copied your idea. The city in my comic is causing madness also. That's directly from this.
Oh, good. There you go.
Influence on me. This to the point I'm mailing Mr. X to my artist to be like, this is how much I want the city to look like. If that's okay with you, if you have a problem, I won't.
Oh, no. I mean, the only thing I ever have a problem with anybody is when somebody copies something directly and calls it a swipe, And I've had that done to me a few times, but not often. But you see other people out there that's not on. But if it's inspired by, like, everything's inspired by things ricocheting around, and if you do your own new version of the classic ancient plot lines or characters or situation, like the Bible says, nothing new under the sun, right? So that's what entertainment is. It should be, your own personal new things of older tropes or themes that people can relate to. So no, it's fair game. I mean, Mr. X came out of a love of older stuff. Like Dean, I think, coined the phrase retrofuturism.
That's exactly what I said. I thought I made that up. I thought now I'm not as clever as I thought it was.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he coined it, but that's what comes to mind. And he would talk about that when I met him and when we started working on this. And I just loved that, like that whole thing of nostalgia mixed with future, and like this commenter Brian saying, like the noir element. And to some of the things that you fellows were discussing earlier, it was originally meant to be basically based on 30s or 40s Art Deco. Not like when the Hernandez brothers came in, it's kind of like everything turned over and it was just handed over to them. I think Dean did a script. I wasn't really that involved. Like I did do actually on this, what you're showing on the screen. I did the lettering and the colors on this because
I was going to say, because you're credited, I was going to
Yeah.
ask you about that too. Even just real quick, how did you color this? Is it like watercolored? Because it has texture. So
yeah, well, what we did was, I have some of them here hang on for
And it's a
mine.
limited palette too.
Hang on.
yeah, the coloring is amazing.
Yeah.
And actually, the lettering is a lot of fun too. I noticed that it's hand lettered, which is rare.
Here, I'll show you something if you just bear with me for one moment. It's right here. It's just a side
Okay,
note.
I can make your screen big when you get back.
So Narwhal, this is the
Yeah.
second time. This is the second time you've got me live streaming with someone who is deeply influential to me as a 12-year, 13-year-old. I will be forever in your debt. I never you introduced me to Mike Barron, and now you introduced me
Yeah,
to
we had
Paul
Mike
here.
Barron on. Paul, have you
cool.
ever hung out with Mike Barron? Was he in the scene at all, or was there a scene in the '80s? Like, did you hang out with Dave Sim or anything? Or
Strangely, I didn't. No, I didn't. I was a fairly much of a lone flyer, I guess, and I did know some of the people in the scene, but it was fairly scattered. Partly it was probably on me, but partly it was also just the way the scene worked. Like, there was not much of a scene. I mean, to try and get that across fully is probably fairly difficult because so much has changed that if you're a younger person, you just wouldn't realize the just complete groundswell or sea change is a better phrase. Because back then, it is not, I don't want to make it seem like 1800, but, I went to Toronto and it was so different. It was very, very conservative and calmer Ontario. And everything would be closed on Sunday type of place. There was no real thriving comic scene. And even psychologically, the idea that graphic novels and comics were accepted by adults, that was just barely beginning to sprout.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
So like I remember my mother when I was a later teenager, just before I left home and got into all this, she'd, bless her, but she'd kind of scoff at like comics I tried to show her because I was so enthusiastic. And now looking back, I understand because it was not accepted in North America, perhaps in places like Japan. But if you read adult comics as an adult and you were, trying to draw them, you just weren't taken seriously as a real artist or as a real profession.
Yeah, but if you duct tape a banana to a wall, you're an artistic
Yeah,
genius
well,
for some reason.
yeah.
100%. I mean, I was always just shocked at that stuff. I mean, I have stories from art school. Like when I said in my little brief bio that I tried to go to art school for a year, I was that same guy as what you're saying, Jason. Like, I was just shocked at what I saw. I got persuaded to by a friend of mine, an art friend, because I dropped out of the University of Toronto for like a Bachelor of Arts. I didn't want to do that. Even though I was good in school, I just was like, I've had enough. I want to be an artist. So I went to the art college, but I had the same thing because there was like a person who had done like as an example, in one of the hallways, there's a display of some lauded, celebrated person who had got like a fish in a blender thing. It was like a blender. They'd filled up the water and there's a fish swimming around in it. And there was the plug dangling, and it's like, that was supposed to be like art.
Oh, so genius.
And I was the guy who was like I said back then, I was like 20 or whatever. I was just saying to my buddies and to myself at night, I was like, what madness am I in? And I couldn't visualize 2025 because that's like another whole thing. But even back then, it was like 1979, 1980. I was in this art college and I was like, what on earth? I just want to learn to draw. I want to learn comic storytelling. I had already been delving into painting and, getting books that I could find. Like, I don't remember if I had Will Eisner's, but I had like Bern Hogarth's books and learned all the mistakes from that until Alex Toth advised me, don't read those, son.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm jumping around. Anyway.
Wait, you talked to Alex
is
Toth?
great.
That's cool.
Yeah, I've got on my channel, if anyone's interested who hasn't seen it, I have a playlist called Toth Cards. So
Okay.
So I had corresponded with him for on and off for quite a few years. Every few months or whatever, sometimes every few weeks. I'd even phone him every so often. And and I got to know him a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't portray myself as a close friend, but I call myself that I was informally semi-mentored by him, I did send him work. I got critiques back. I accepted it. I didn't, as they say, spurg out and go on the internet. Well, there was no internet.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wrote him
like,
and I said, what do you think of this?
No, anyway. Yeah.
Sorry?
You weren't like, Tote doesn't know anything.
No. It was like, it's something that is going to port us over into a different conversation, I suppose. But what the hell this is the internet. It goes wherever. You didn't, back then, and again, this is all about the sea change. It's like, I liken it to an airship. The business was the airship, and it was this beautiful thing going, and call it like commercial art or illustration or comics or whatever you wanted. But it's the airship's up there. I'm this ant down here, and there's like a ladder that's coming down from it. And the whole thing was, how do I get on the bottom rung of the ladder, climb that thing into the airship so I'm finally like a pro? So that's what it was all about. It wasn't about all this other weird stuff. And it doesn't, it was about, can I get onto that ladder? Now, of course, there's a whole critique that can be done very legitimately, that there were gatekeepers and that there was factions, just as you see now on the internet, and, all that stuff. So, it's not a black or white thing, but the idea was back then, there was a straight and narrow gate that you had to go through to get into the business. You had to be good enough to a basic level. You also had to know people a bit. And I don't know how the hell I got myself onto talking about that.
Yeah. Well, I think they still do that in Japan a little bit, where they won't even give you a critique if you can't draw perspective and anatomy. And
exactly.
So, the two basic things. And so I was like, we could stand for a little bit more of that in America, I think, maybe.
Well, I think that, I forget if I just mused this to myself or if I tweeted it, and other people have observed this. Like, there's again always different sides to the same coin, the silver lining and the whatever. The idea now is that people can self-publish on the internet, and there's no gatekeepers, so you can just put your work out there, and there's no one who's going to stop you. But the thing is that has a good side and a bad side. It's a good side because you don't have a barrier of somebody who's got like some reason to stop you or doesn't like you politically or doesn't like you because you're not in the right buddies network and you haven't schmoozed with them at conventions. The bad side is, in a way, if you want to call it bad, without sounding too mean, is, anybody can do it. So if you're not careful, it can become a vanity press. So you can have people pushing stuff out, and it's not going to be as good as what would have gotten you published back in 1980. That's what I meant about the lowest rungs of the ladder. So there's been an erosion, I think, very strongly of that professional standard, which, some people I've seen online are saying that that's like some elitism and all this. I don't think it's elitism. It's just...
next thing you know, guys like me are making comic books.
No, you should. Anybody should. And the market should answer what it wants.
I feel attacked.
Sorry?
The guy in the chat.
Just in the chat.
Oh, I wasn't reading. I'll turn my chat on. I wasn't reading it.
Paul, it is a. I agree. I see what you're saying, because behind me I've got like Azat and Aztec Ace and obviously Mr. X, and so to some extent and obviously Nexus, which is in my mind the GOAT indie comic. It is true that when you look at the caliber of the 80s independent stuff, pound for pound, it is better than what's the average or the mean of what's out there right now.
Well,
so I see what you're saying.
Indie stuff is the best stuff, if you ask me.
Oh yeah,
it is
now. Yeah, it is now.
Like now we got nothing but Nightwing and Harley Quinn fartacular. You know what I mean? But you look at the indie stuff. I'm not going to spend my own money on something that is crap. You know what I mean? You're making Jupiter, which I thought was fabulous. And look at Narwhal here, small town.
Jupiter carries on the '80s tradition a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
there we go.
City. Woo.
So, but like the funny thing is, like the mainstream is falling into the toilet. It's
yeah.
Because this is this is literally a meritocracy right now. If I don't sell, I'm done. I don't have Warner Brothers money to prop me up.
Absolutely. And I applaud that. And really that's, when I talk about the 80s, I think back then with the Mr. X thing, it was the Wild West. It was like Go West, young men, like I said earlier. I had nothing. I was just a kid, and it was like there was no real business in Canada. And it was just like you got to go and just try and generate something and do something. And that's what I was all about. And the people I knew, there was a handful of us in Toronto, not many. And we were just trying to establish like a beachhead, right? The invasion, make a beachhead. But there are some great talents I met. Like there's a fellow, I don't know if he's in Orlando. I think I last saw on his Facebook page, Frank Reyes. You might have seen him, who's from the Philippines originally and worked in animation. I met him at Nelvana. And he comes from a whole talented school of Filipino artists, like the ones that were imported in the 80s to do a lot of inking and comics and stuff for DC Comics. But so his work blew my doors off. Like I remember meeting him one time, the guy that ran the Silver Snail, Ron Van Leeuwen, and then he had the distribution company Andromeda. So he had an art studio above his store, which is where Dean and I and Ken Stacy and a few other people had this studio. And so I think it was just before we moved in there, the same space, it wasn't built out. Yeah, he had this young guy, Frank Reyes from the Philippines, and he had this comic he had done, Eric Khan. And it was just fabulous figure work and stuff. Like I don't know how to communicate it. The whole thing to me was just like a wonderland. I mean, because for me, I was trying to find a pathway into becoming a professional, that airship that I mentioned. And I moved to Toronto, and then I discovered this whole nest of people. I guess it's an equivalent to what people find now on the internet, minus the fighting.
Yeah, and that's I wish there would have been more of that now, because when people tell stories about that, I love it. I get kind of nostalgic for it, but I never experienced it. Of when you mentioned that you randomly shared a art studio with 5 people, and they're all awesome, and you're all bouncing off each other. I'm like, oh, I wish there was something like that. The closest thing is the internet, but it's not the same. It's not as cool. And there are galleries in my town I'm living in now, and I'll go out and hang out in those scenes, but it's not like I go out and meet a genius that inspires me. It's not really like that.
Yeah, it's you get something unique from rubbing elbows, and interacting in person. And I'm not against the internet. I'm just against the dark side of it, which I think there's definitely when you filter everything like this very human, normal response of artists being enthusiastic and wanting to work together, learn off each other. When you filter that through the internet and social media companies and algorithms, and then all sorts of other human factors, you can get a very dark and negative thing, and that's counterproductive, I think, especially for young artists. Like any young artist I could grab and would they'd listen to me. If I could grab them by the scruff, I'd just say be very careful getting into all that stuff, because you think about it, every minute, day, and hour, hour, minute, whatever the right order, that you spend on all this nonsense online when it's the negative stuff instead of the learning, it's all wasted. You didn't spend your time writing or practicing drawing or anatomy or how to produce a print file or God knows what else. There's just a million things to know. You have it all just flushed down this toilet of all this stuff. So that's the negative side. But, it does still exist. There's a studio here in Toronto called Raid that I was part of for a while. Ramon Perez and a whole bunch of people. And that's kind of the model that you're talking about, Per, that still does exist in isolated spots. It's probably difficult to keep going or even to establish because of, economics and personalities and a whole bunch of stuff. So,
yeah. If you go even in movies, I wonder about that kind of stuff of how does it work out that George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, all those guys, they're all friends. They're all in the same class in California or whatever. And I'm like, man, that is so crazy. And I heard someone said a line on Twitter. I forget who it was. They said Brian Eno invented this term, but he called it scenius, which is how many geniuses are in a scene at any given time. So your studio in Toronto had good scenius because you have 5, 6 all at once. And in Hollywood in the 70s with those guys coming up, But yeah, it's like we don't really have. You can see those pockets where you're like, oh man, magic was really happening. How did they all come together?
Yeah.
Like, oh, one other I saw. It was like an elementary school photo of Enrico Morricone and Sergio Leone in like third grade. You know, I'm like, oh my god, they
Right.
grew up together. Like that's crazy. That's
You know, the weird thing is at the time you don't know what it is. Like I look back and I go now, if only I'd known it was the 80s. Because it was just like you're just living, you're trying to survive. You're a young guy in my case, you know, your things are going forward, but it was fairly exciting. Like there was a lot of struggle too, like you know, any of us have trying to be creative people. But there was a lot of exciting stuff, like the studio we had in Queen Street West in Toronto. It was about a block away from Much Music, it was called, which here in Toronto is City TV. They started their, it's like a version of MTV. So
my,
they started,
my wife talks about much. My wife is from Canada, so
yeah. So they had this building that was right nearby, and there were rock stars coming and going. And even this Dean Motter, he was working on album covers for a lot of top names. So I remember, for example, Alana Miles, if you know who that is, she came into the studio once. She did Black Velvet, you know that song, Black Velvet.
Oh yeah. Yep.
yeah.
And she did a bunch of other wonderful stuff. But people like that were coming in and out. Or even back when I was working on Rock and Roll, Cheap Trick, who worked on the soundtrack, I remember them coming through
one of the
the.
most underrated bands of all time.
Yeah, they were great. And I think I remember Checkered Pants. Did they have checkered pants, John?
Yep. And baseball cap and yep.
Yeah, and I think I remember them coming through. And I was just that was just when I started. I was in this layout crew. It was like a kind of like a bullpen, a big room.
My father used to get mistaken for the drummer from Cheap Trick.
Oh, really?
He's like, I'll say yes if that gets me into this restaurant faster.
Yeah. So, you know, it was exciting. It was like, it was in person. There was no internet. You had to show up, get up every day, show up, do your thing. And like I said, I wouldn't misportray it overly. Like, you had your dull times. But I do feel generally the mood of the times as it developed into the 80s, it was exciting, you know, and there were new things happening. The Mr. X project was one of them for me, and it kind of eventually hit some sour notes, let's say, and got complicated, and I left and I moved on. But it was a great learning experience. And speaking of that, I was going to show you because you were asking about the coloring.
Yeah, let's look at the coloring.
So because I worked on the Hernandez brothers and I was coloring, I think Fantagraphics got a hold of me, and I did a whole bunch of coloring for the Jaime Hernandez's Mechanics series.
Oh yeah, I have that.
So I'm pretty sure I used the same method. I'm going to be selling these probably soon on eBay.
Wow.
What they are is they're not color guides like you would normally think of them. They're actually painted like originals, and they're done European style.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's like animation style a little bit too.
Yeah, exactly. Except you don't have any cell color painted on the back of the film. This is called a film positive, where you've got the black and white art is on a piece of acetate.
Wow.
And so what I did is I had these made, these film positives, and the problem was that the way European, maybe I can come back to join you guys. I've got whole stacks of these here from the Mechanics series, but I don't have any of the Mr. X ones. But I knew about this European coloring somehow, and that's how they did it in Europe, is that you would paint, I used gouache, or you could use inks. I think I used a combination of inks and gouache. And so what happened was I knew about this process, and it was a little bittersweet to turn from being the artist on Mr. X to becoming the colorist and letterer. But I think I can't remember clearly, but I think I did it probably just because, like, I didn't want to say F you, I'm just totally gone. They didn't have anyone else. I was trying to be helpful. Mm-hmm. Looking back, I don't think I'd do it that way. I should have just made a clean break. Anyway.
Canadians are too nice.
Sorry?
Canadians are too nice.
Yeah, too nice. I wouldn't do that now, but you know, you're young, you learn. It's all learning. So I'd known about this European coloring method where they weren't just painting an original, they were doing the art in black and white. This is all pre-digital for younger people who, you know, there was no Photoshop or computer or scanning yourself. There was scanning at companies. Like these would have gotten scanned for the reproduction. But the main problem I hit was one of cost. And that's to say that European people would use blue lines. So they would have their black and white art printed onto a piece of paper with regular printer. But I couldn't afford that because when I looked into it, it was like, how the hell am I going to pay for this? So what I did, which I think is kind of cool looking back, is these are, what I did is I Xeroxed the black and white art onto pieces of card.
Okay.
And you probably can't see it here, but I sprayed the hell out of it with white acrylic airbrush.
Oh.
Oh,
okay.
no way. That's
Yeah.
outside the box. That's cool.
I just sprayed it back. Each one I can still remember. I take a whole batch of them, tape them down, spray them. And it made like the 10% or 15% cyan like look.
Wow.
And it saved me all this time. So
Wow.
that's kind of proud of that in a dumb way. So
Yeah, that's awesome, actually. That's so fun that, yeah, I don't know, the traditional ways computers, yeah, like nowadays, I guess you just use Photoshop or whatever. But it's so cool to see that process. And it looks amazing because it'll be like sort of flats, but they have the texture, you know?
yeah, I think on
And
Mr. X, I was using inks though. That these ones are, I think I had learned a bit because I did this a bit later for mechanics for Fantagraphics. So I think I was experimenting on that, and it was a bit washier, because I was on the paper, and I don't know if I think maybe even on some of those Mr. X ones, I was hand tracing on a light box the film, the reduced film positives onto paper, as far as I can recall. But that became
And then coloring those.
yeah, like each silhouette shape. But all of it goes into the big hopper of experience and learning. Like for me doing that, and I had to do the same process, doing lots of airbrush illustrations where you're cutting around each shape. It really shows you the value of silhouettes in art,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yep.
Like because I had to trace each one, you do it through repetition. You go, oh, the penny drops, the twig falls, whatever it is. You
Yeah.
go, oh, this is like, because Alex Toth, I've said on some of my videos, he'd be writing me saying, son, you got to think of silhouettes more. It's a key principle in animation and cartooning. So
Yeah.
that didn't integrate until experience came in where I was doing this. And finally, at some point, I was like, oh, it was dawning on me. That's what he's talking about, is 90% of the power of a drawing is in the silhouette itself. If you get that right.
And if
like
you're
the cutout
coloring
art?
if you're coloring on Photoshop, you're not going to get that.
You're not thinking that way. You're just thinking lots of lines, pizzazz, gradients.
I didn't think of that until I started working on my comic with my character, the Patriarch, when I realized that his silhouette was exactly like Superman. So I made changes to make it unique. But
Yeah.
I never thought of it until last year, and I've been reading comics my whole life,
And if you look at classic animation characters and lineups, like the best of Disney and many others, even now, even the more stylized ones, the animation designers are usually much more onto this stuff. It's not a black or white thing. There's some very good comics people that know all about this, like all the greats, for example. But if you look at animation design lineups of characters, they're usually very, very aware of that. Like, you can't have all the characters inhabiting exactly the same types of silhouettes, the same types of patterns and shapes. You need variety. So anyway, It's nice seeing this Jaime Hernandez art. I always liked his work. It's very skilled.
So that's one of my questions, though, I guess. So it's the same team that does Love and Rockets kind of straight up, except you're coloring it. Is that?
Yeah. I was
That
adding
might be
in,
why it was hyped a little bit too.
Yes, that's why I got turned onto it. My friend was like, you like Love and Rockets? You got to get this.
Yeah.
On the coloring, I want to point out to the people watching that most of the story happens at night, but Paul, as the colorist, did a fantastic job of never making it monotonous. He's able to portray the illusion of being at night, indoor, outdoor, using different color palettes that lend themselves to the scene changes. So kudos to you, Paul. You did a
thanks.
fantastic job, because a lot of people, it would have, if the story takes place all at night, eventually, by the end of the book, it's going to be monotonous. You
Right.
did a great job of mixing up the color palette.
oh, thank you. No, I mean, it was all a learning thing. I was sitting there at night. It was night in the scenes. I was sitting there at night trying to figure out. I would be studying these French albums by Mobius that had been colored by, there's expressive color, right? Like getting myself to be non-literal. They had been these wonderful Incal Noir albums by Mobius that had been colored by the immortal Yves Chalon, who is a French artist that passed away in 1990. But he is just a brilliant cartoonist, one of my top 3 or 5 favorite people. But he was also not as well known at all for having colored at least 1 or 2 of the, I don't remember how many, but certainly the first Incal album by Mobius, which I loved.
Yeah, those are great.
So I was studying that, like how he did it, and his, alternation between like literal coloring and non-literal. And North American comics also have this, dance. Although now I would say it's much more skewed to literal. They don't have as much expressive, symbolic, abstract coloring.
Yeah.
It's all very, dark and.
Like we got a abstract coloring for this panel when he.
Yeah,
looks.
I think it kind of works, but
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah. Well, the other thing, just thinking about it too, if you're mixing the colors there, as you're coloring, that like naturally lends itself to like color theory way more than just digitally guessing colors.
Oh yeah,
Throwing in whatever you can or whatever.
and Per doing it this way was like the equivalent of straight ahead drawing, which I've extolled the virtues of on some of my YouTube videos, which I've been using to teach myself cartooning and just have fun really. Because what it is Photoshop gives you unlimited undo and variations. So it's like a deep, thick forest of choices and possibilities. But if you don't have a prior background in how to filter, it can be, I don't know, it just can be a lot at once. So what you had to do here was you had to think very carefully, because I could paint over, and I think I must have, I don't remember, but you didn't want to do a lot of redoing. You had to kind of think out color schemes and understand where you were going in terms of values and color choices and intersecting with the storytelling, as you were saying, like, you see what I mean? So whereas in Photoshop, you can always just delete the layer, you can undo, you can swirl around. This kind of focuses you.
Yeah, like even like this bright orange, if you put that down first on a white page, it's going to look weird. But you got to know that when you get to the end, it's going to look good, with all the other colors playing off.
And from animation, I had seen them doing color scripts, which they do in animation. I don't know how much I'd have to look through the comic I don't have in front of me to see how much I did this, but I know that in these early times I was cluing into the idea of color scripts. And again, the good comics colorists use these as they do in animation, which is in animated films, there'll be a person doing a whole color script for the whole movie, which is like little thumbnails of the different changes of mood and color sequence. So, if it's very foggy and misty here, what's our palette? And then you want to change to the next scene. We can't just keep repeating the same thing. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to do a new set of color choices that it's like different wardrobes, right? And it tells the story through a color script. So that kind of knowledge is really, really useful. It's like the deep lore that you can use in comics. You can use it in animation. That's what I keep, when I get a chance, I harp about and mystifies me about watching this bizarre online culture where it's mostly centered on bizarre fights between random factions of people. It's like watching mongrels like chew on each other. It's like, what are you guys doing?
You came to the right place to escape from that, Paul.
Yeah, so I'm very relieved.
It's exhausting and it's chasing people away. It's
I 100% think it is. I'm totally convinced of that.
Yeah, you mentioned. I want to get back to Mr. X, but you mentioned earlier the opportunity cost. If you're spending time online arguing with people, there's the opportunity cost of the artwork you're not doing and the skills you're not acquiring. The other downside is the people that you're alienated. Everybody is a potential customer.
Absolutely.
You're alienating people. So
absolutely,
we agree with you, Paul, and we're so happy that I'm extra happy that you're here. This is just a dream to be able to talk to you and hear the stories about this.
Thanks. No, and I know. I mean, I'm sure every creative person has had this. Have you had moments where you have an epiphany, or you have a breakthrough, or you're working on something and struggling, and then suddenly, like it's like have you ever been on a jet and you're climbing up through the clouds and you come up through the clouds like it's dim and then it's boom, bright sunshine and you see the whole world.
Yeah.
I've had creative moments like that where I've been struggling and struggling with something, and then I get inspiration. So for me, again, that's my plea, like I was saying earlier, Jason, that you just alluded to. Every night you spend arguing in this cesspool of negativity, you might miss some angel was going to send you that inspiration, and you'd have that idea for your new series or your new drawing, your new breakthrough. I know I had them as a teenager, just working in my little room, drawing and drawing. So weeks would go by, nothing too much happening, and then at some point, some corner would be turned, and it would be like, wow, I can do this now. I get it. I see what this artist like Jack Kirby, I'm studying his New Gods comics. I see why he did that. And now I can take that over into my own work, and it would be the same for writing, drawing, whatever. So that's the steady, slow steps through the years that you get somewhere. But this online stuff, I wish I could get it across to people. It's very seductive, like processed food or candy. But 10 years are going to go by in a blink, and you won't be any better.
Oh, yeah. You know how many days I wasted? And then one day I just said to myself, this isn't making my comic book any better.
Exactly.
And I literally stopped fighting and I used to love to fight.
Yeah, me too. I did it before years ago. This online stuff. Yeah, years ago.
I used to love to get to the forums, and some guy said something wrong about Batman. So I had to be up till 2 o'clock in the morning and wake up.
Paulus says, stop attacking.
I just want to point this out. This made me so happy that Luba from Love and Rockets.
Little cameo.
And is that Frida Kahlo with the one eyebrow too? Another one of the Hernandez brothers heroes.
I don't know. I've read interviews with them where they suddenly got this assignment, and I think they must have needed money or something like that, like we all do. So they just had to kind of pick the ball up and run with it. So they took it in their own unique direction. And it certainly wasn't exactly like the direction Dean and I were thinking of. I mean, it had a smattering of them. And I'm not trying to take it away from them because I think they did a great job for what they were given. Because it was kind of like a commercial art assignment. It's like suddenly, okay, draw this comic. Write and draw this whole thing.
That's kind of fun though, yeah. Yeah, it's the first issue especially is kind of weird. Like I kind of like the bad guy, this gangster. He's actually really likable. Mr. X is actually a little bit less likable in the first issue. And the whole thing's kind of funny too, but kind of serious.
In its own comic, because you don't really know anything about him in the first issue, which is, I thought, perfect given that he's Mr. X.
Yeah.
Very good.
And then, as the thing developed, it got some attention, and there were spin-off things. Like I'll show you this. Speaking of, this is a beer can that was done through Black Label, Carling Black Label. I kept a bunch of them.
Oh wow!
Oh wow! That's
and
amazing.
It's got Mr. X on it, and so I did
wait,
the
is
drawing.
that from the 80s then?
Yeah, that's got the dust, the original 80s dust on it. And I drank the beer long ago. But,
that's much cooler than OK Cola.
Man, that's what we need. We need comics on beers, like DC, Marvel, whatever. Get back on.
Yeah. Well, so I think through Dean, and Dean had connections through ad agencies because he worked in ads. And, later I got into doing that kind of work. But back then I didn't know anybody in advertising. But anyway, he must have known people, and they somehow did this campaign with these limited run. And I've got 3 of them. So I don't know if they're worth like 10 cents or worth $100, but I don't know if there's beer can collectors out there. I have to look into it. But
it tastes like his fluid that kept you awake.
Yeah. Today, speaking of where the world's going, it wouldn't even be beer. It would be a weird Monster energy drink kind of thing. It's like really bad for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
Hey,
Paul, I have a quick question though, or Jason, you go, then I'll.
Yeah, so just a quick question. I was alive, obviously, in the early '80s, and you would buy anything that had X in the title because the X-Men were hot. Did Marvel ever send you guys like a cease and desist order or anything like that for having X in the title?
Not that I'm aware of. No. I don't think it was even on our radar that I remember. Okay. I don't know what Dean would say, but it was just I don't know where he got the Mr. X thing from. It might even have been a placeholder, but I don't know if I'm inventing that. But it might have been just like, I don't know what this character's name is, so we'll just call him Mr. X for now. And it stuck,
It works.
There was kind of a line like that in like issue 2 or something. or issue 3. They almost say that. It's
Well, his
Mercedes.
name was Eichmann, so like, or was it pronounced X-Men? You know, that I didn't think of that until
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, yeah.
comparing to this. You know, I was like,
Um,
Yeah.
have I been saying his name wrong? Is it really pronounced X-Men? And you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't.
real quick, there's no hard limit on how long we go, but I had 90 minutes in mind, so I have a few more questions, Paul, for sure, though, and we'll see where it goes and everything. And feel free to dip out at any point, anyone can.
Yeah,
but-
no, I'm good for a bit. It's really your stream, so whenever you feel you've heard enough about good old Mr. X, just let me know.
Well, the
And then-
thing too is, I want to stay in touch and maybe stream again in a month or two if you're free.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool,
no,
that'd be awesome. Because it's great talking to you. You have a lot of experience and knowledge and everything. But one question I have is, so coming off of Mr. X, and you're kind of young and you're learning all this stuff. Where did you go from there? Like a few steps. Like what did you work on after that?
Yeah, it was. See if I can bring it back. You know, it was a really, what's the word? Rough and tumble kind of time because, you know, it was kind of like, I don't know, bungee jumping, skydiving. I just launched myself out of the normie world of like, my dad would be writing me letters and send me $50, you know, like I'm the starving artist, like a check back then, you know, and every month or two he'd send me $50, which back then was enough to, this is a little bit before Mr. X, because I did start making money through Nelvana and so on. But I'm trying to paint a picture of the times. It was like, he'd say like, can you come back home and go to university, and just really reading between the lines is like, son, why can't you be normal? But I was just driven. So the Mr. X thing happened for a while, but then really I got into the problems with Dean and with the direction of it. And I also wasn't really making money. Thanks there, Paulus, fellow Paul in your name.
Yeah, a couple of Paul.
You know, I wasn't really making money, and the film had ended, the Nelvana. I did this Mr. X thing. There's a whole series of, like we get in life, you know, ups and downs. So there's a lot of downs because I was really bummed out about this whole thing collapsing, and I left it. And then the studio I was in, which by then was a different studio. We had all moved to a bigger place called the Darling Building, which was like on the 9th floor of this old garment district building. It was like a factory, and it still had the old wood floors, these giant steam rads that would bake you. Even in winter, you'd just be roasting. And they had the remains of the sewing machine outlines where the oil from the sewing machines had made an outline in the wood floor. You know, so you could see where the installations used to be that had been removed. So it was very picturesque. We were in the studio, and then one day these guys that I was with, they had some big fight, talk about drama. And someone, I forget who, maybe it was Dean or somebody, said, hey, by the way, in a month, the lease is over. I was like, well, what's going on? Like, it's like, oh, well, we're all moving, we're all splitting up. And it was just like traumatic because as a young guy, and I have, you know, gone through this, like I stopped working on Mr. X, but I still had, you know, a place to go to, socializing, right? And then it was like a harsh introduction to like, you know, you're on your own, buddy, like you're a freelancer. And I guess looking back, it's good because it kind of rubs your nose back in, which I've said even to art students and years ago when I do presentations occasionally, I'd say, you know, don't think, and we see this now much more so clearly with the downturn in animation work, is you're always going to be a business person and a freelancer, even if you get hired by some big company. Mm-hmm. So what I did exactly was I was really bummed out, and then I picked myself back up, and I had a buddy, Jeff, that was trying to be an artist, and he eventually went off and worked for an architectural firm. That's a different story, but I convinced him to go with me, and we leased a place together. We found a place not that far away in downtown Toronto. And this is all like new steps. So I was like, how the hell do I do that? But we managed to lease a place, and I started a little studio with, got a few more artists on board. We each had our little space. Like for a short while, we had, if you know Bob Jakes, he's a cartoonist that was very closely involved with John Crispolucci in creating Ren and Stimpy. Okay. So he and I were buddies for a little bit back then, and Bob had this portion of this new studio that I started. And I remember my little story I tell is, he was so enthusiastic, Bob, about Ren and Stimpy. He said, I got this buddy. It became this kind of thing where I was like, yeah. Because he'd always be saying, I got this buddy, John, and we're working on the show. It's going to be great. It's going to be big. It's Ren and Stimpy. And I was like, okay, yeah. And he'd tell, do shtick and tell me the routines. But then, of course, a year or two later, like he eventually left. And I think he moved out west or to LA or wherever it was. And then, you see it on TV and it becomes the next big thing, which was kind of cool. But anyway, long story short, I got into doing illustration and I developed a freelance career doing illustration. It was all learning curves because there was, go ahead.
Oh, no,
I think you just coughed.
Oh, sorry. I thought you had a question.
No, it was a cough. I got a cough.
That's okay. I got some too coming up. So, it was like I had to morph. It's like the stages you go through in life. Say, you're single, you get married, you become a parent. It was kind of like a parallel to that. It was like the bell is tolling. It tolls for you. You have to change. And because I was like, I either go back home with my tail between my legs and I listen to my dad, who's still telling me, you should come back home, go to university. You can live with us for a few years, get a degree and go be a lawyer or a doctor. You're good at arguing, so be a lawyer. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So I was like, I got to reinvent myself. So for most of the later 80s, I was doing illustration. I got really busy. I got an agent. I was doing all kinds of magazine illustration, CD covers. Dean Motter gave me some work through, like, we didn't work on Mr. X, but we weren't like bitter enemies. So he gave me design work. I was doing airbrush paintings, all kinds of stuff. And eventually that kind of morphed itself into, later I got married and we had a house. I have two daughters that are now grown up, but it was like, oh, what am I going to do now? I need more moolah. So the story I tell is that I think I must have phoned Alex Toth or written him, but it was another example of why what we're touching on earlier, all of us, about good relationships and networking. Like my late dad used to always tell me as a kid, Paul, he'd say, your relationships, you have to, and it was like he was trying to give me the networking speech. Mm-hmm. So I didn't understand it as a teenager, but then later I could see, because there can be that one moment that changes your entire life. So in my case, in this next iteration of my sort of journey, I think I must have told Alex Toth, I was like, I'd gotten married, we had a baby on the way, we had a house that we'd committed to, which seems laughably low now compared to the housing prices. Right. But, for me, it was semi-terrifying because, you got this monthly thing, you got this house that's closing. So in one golden moment, Alex Toth says, on the phone, he's like, well, this fellow Bruce Timm has been talking to me at Warner Brothers. They're doing Batman, and they need designer. I'll send you his, or maybe he had the phone number. I don't remember, but he gave me his phone number. I phoned Bruce Timm, and Bruce Timm, when he picked up the phone, he said, "Oh, Paul Rivoche, I was going to phone you because Alex Toth told me."
That's amazing.
And then I got this whole years of work from Warner Brothers,
That's wonderful.
which I'm very grateful for. And looking back, it was like again, sorry.
And
It's the Batman the Animated Series, in my opinion, is the best iteration of Batman.
Yeah, they did a great job.
Better than the movies. It is awesome.
And I assume Bruce Timm was familiar with Mr. X.
Yeah, and I think they, in one of their books, or I forget where, there's another fellow that I don't know personally, I never interacted with, Eric Radomski. I think he was the art director and artist on some of the early stuff. I don't know how to attribute it properly because I'm not totally up on it, but I know that I saw a reference where, and I think even Darwin Cook told me later or something, that they had said that was one of the influences on, stripping down the background look and making it very angular and stylized and simplified. So it's another example about how influences echo and rebound in this very interesting way, as long as it's all positive. And when you have an openness to, take in different influences, like I think I occasionally rant on my X account about younger cartoonists, like they just seem to look at one thing. Like there's just decades, eons of illustrators, cartoonists. They're just.
Earlier this week, you threw out Werner Kremer, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. People don't appreciate the life in his line, and
Yeah.
you know, Richie Rich was, I mean, they were selling millions of those a
Yeah.
month, right?
Yeah.
And just like you can say, hey, this isn't like my comic, but there's something Americana about his line
Oh,
and
yeah.
his cartooning, and you have to find stuff that when it strikes a chord, even if it's not the song you want to listen to right now, if it
Yeah.
strikes a chord, embrace it and try to figure out, why does it work and why does it click with you, and then how do you add that to your toolbox.
Absolutely. Like growing up, my parents, again, all before internet, obviously, they had signed up to Time Life books, if any of you remember that. So for people listening, whoever listens to this later doesn't know, but it seems so, quaint and ancient. But you could sign up and they would mail you a book every month or two, whatever it was. And they had signed up to a bunch of different series of them. And we had the encyclopedias. But anyway, Time Life books, they'd mail different artists. And my dad would be showing me like Degas and Cézanne and Monet and all the different, painters from France and different places. And I remember as a teen, I just didn't click. I was more like Frazetta, Conan and Jack Kirby and all these different things. But later, I was glad to have been at least exposed to them, because it finally did completely click. Like, and particularly under the urging of Alex Toth, like you have to hear it from somebody, right? Even if you don't want to hear the message. And Alex Toth wasn't critical, to me at least, but he was saying in his postcards that he wrote when we corresponded, he was saying, widen your influences, which is what he was doing, I realize now. Mm-hmm. And he meant it. He was a sincere student. As much as he had this later reputation of being a curmudgeon, which is like a tip of the iceberg, he was really a lover of art and a fountain of knowledge, because he was studying all this stuff himself. So a lot of those pennies began dropping for me, and I started, in my 20s, I guess, looking at a lot more of this stuff. And there's just so much. I mean, if you go outside cartooning and comics, which alone, there's the Warren Kramers, and there's just endless people. Even in fine art and painting, there's so much to absorb from all that stuff.
We lost John. It might have been his internet. He might be back.
Oh, yeah. And the thing I would say that links it back to comics is, all the people that we admire as the older, the John Buscema's, the Jack Kirby's, whatever, they were all in the time when comics had just emerged not that long ago. And they're in the lineage of traditional art, right? They were a new branch or offshoot that was sprouting and developing, and it had already been developing for a while. But they were still connected to it, like in the way a sprout would be connected to the main trunk. I think the danger now is that too many people, because of the internet, it's got a good and bad side, like I said. It's like a million miles wide, but sometimes an inch deep. And everything has been chopped up into little fragments that are devoid of context. So you don't have to do much effort. All this stuff streams in front of you, but you've got the flotsam and jetsam of the centuries, but you don't know what it means. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, like when I think of, and not to over glorify my own journey, but I was like in a little room in this, we had like a, I think, what was it? A four bedroom, half bungalow, not bungalow, but a split house, half of a bigger house in Ottawa. My dad was working for the government, and we were now nowhere near rich. And I was like in this tiny room. I just had a very limited amount of books and comics and things. And you had to kind of extract, like it's panning for gold, right? Mm-hmm. You're trying to extract, like, from these limited resources, like, how do I get better? Mm-hmm. And that's like been my kind of whole life journey, is like, how do I get better? And I call it going up Art Mountain. It's like, how do I get higher on this mountain?
I've thought that hypothetically, if like you could learn, I think I was thinking about movies maybe, but if you could learn how to make a good movie, but you could only watch one movie and it's not even like a masterpiece, like whatever, maybe it can be a good movie, is it even possible? And it's like, there's weird ways that you can extrapolate a lot of lessons from painting.
Yeah, but I think, I guess where I'm going with that is, when you have limited access, mm-hmm. it forces creativity and invention, and it really focuses you. It's like I've seen videos or maybe on Twitter, I don't know, the cesspool of diamonds and sewage that is X.
Do
The
you
streaming.
think constraint creates good art? Like,
Sorry.
do you think like constraint and rules creates good art? Because I
Yeah,
know
I mean,
artists that purposely limit their palette and they won't, you know what I mean? And it says it forces me to become creative, but if I have infinite color palette, it becomes just like a computerized soulless comic.
I would say there's something to that, certainly as an exercise. And I was going to allude to, like, I saw an X in Africa somewhere in some, unfortunately poor and misbegotten place, people making bicycles out of wood sticks and stuff. And like they made their own like scooters out of like random driftwood and sticks, and they'd make spokes, and they'd make a scooter that you could actually pile stuff up on and push, like a push scooter, almost Flintstones like.
Yeah.
And it was a real thing. It wasn't like an AI thing or fake. And I was like, that's what is it? Inventivity? Is that a word? Creativity.
Yeah.
I know some people get mad when I say this, but I thought like the best comics came out under the Comics Code Authority. Chris Claremont couldn't really go nuts with the Hellfire Club and the X-Men, so him and John Byrne, they made it suggestive enough so that I didn't catch it in sixth grade, but as an adult, I'm like, this was bad. I think if there was no Comics Code Authority, if this was Marvel now, it would have just been so suggestive, and I think that kind of would have lost some of the charm. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, definitely when it's too wide open, you need some constraints, like it's really the deepest communication and principles you want to get to. Like what makes me think of, as we're talking about this, speaking of color, is look at the earlier comics that only had I think 64 or 128 colors, and then they started adding more. This is before digital. They started adding K-tones and they got more sophisticated. But look at the amazing work, like on X, I've been seeing Kevin Wolf was posting these and other people, but Neil Adams, those wonderful covers he did for Batman and Dead Man and all, like those were done with such a limited color palette, very few gradations, sometimes some simple wash, like dark tones were added, but they just had incredible impact. And I think that, it's because the people doing it had an artistic sensibility and an understanding of, a rich understanding of color. And I don't want to be the, black pill guy, but I think there's a danger of that being lost sight of. There's a kind of an artistic feeling that you can't really put in words, a richer feeling that, I do see some of it, like in some of the tweets we were talking about on X. I do see a lot of people. There's some people in comics, and on Instagram, there's some amazingly creative people. So it's not all dark, but I'm just kind of against, and particularly if you're a beginner person, I think there's a real danger of just plunging into the like super AI, 3D assets, Photoshop. I'm not against Photoshop. Like I use it all the time, but personally, I feel glad that I was forced to learn. Like this is what I guess maybe laboriously trying to get at. I was forced to learn in a time when none of that was available. And you had to sit there and actually, like, if I'm going to do this airbrush painting, I got to stick down a sheet of Frisket and take an X-Acto knife and cut out every darn little shape. And it really focuses your mind, right? Because if you cut too deep, you make a score in the paper. Then when you airbrush it, the ink seeps in and you get this little frazzle line where it's like bled. And then you have to try and touch it up with like gouache paint over ink, which doesn't work very well because the deadline's tomorrow morning. And there's no other way to fix it other than maybe redo it.
Yeah.
So there's a level of there's a tangible level of craft and concentration that raises your game overall.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, we're losing that in everything. Yeah, I'm a construction worker, and when you work down in Lower Manhattan, you see all those beautiful brick buildings with sculptures in the when those get damaged. You'd think in the United States, one of the biggest countries in the world, they actually have to go and hire people from Italy because we don't train anybody. We put up sheetrock, we put up steel, but we don't know how to fix sculpted concrete or sculpted plaster anymore. That's a lost art in America. So it's 100%
absolutely. Like, and the thing is that maybe societally, whatever curve or train, the direction, the whole big enchilada is going, you can't stop it. The good news is individually, if you make the choice, which is again, if you know, if I'm metaphorically, you know, making a plea to young people, it's like you can escape this on an individual level. The rule may be applied to the mass, but you can be the sheep that's going the opposite direction, not over the cliff. You can reclaim all this stuff. Like in the last few years, I've been having some vision problems, and looking at these screens is giving me all sorts of problems. So that and other factors has pushed me back to actually using a brush and ink and markers. And it's great. It's like it reminds me right back to when I was that guy in 1983 doing this Mr. X stuff. You know, it's what it's all about, because you get something personal from that process of interacting with the paper, the marker, the moment. You have to, you know, it's the brush line. I've got this whole drawing I'm doing back then or now, and it's like a brush line. It's loaded with ink, or it might be a marker, brush marker. I'm sure you know too, Per, Jason, you know, what I'm talking about. Like, there's that whole moment of adventure. You got to get it right.
Yeah, yeah, you get a little adrenaline.
Yeah, it's a certain like kick you get from that. And I get it online too, like when I'm working in Photoshop, but it's a different thing because you know you can just mess with it again.
Yeah, yeah, I can get a little bit more in the zone if I'm doing traditional, where time flies, you forget where you are or whatever. It's a little
But
bit
Per,
easier.
I was gonna ask you on this Vatican City. I've seen some very nice color work. So you're doing the color work too on that?
Yeah, yeah. So that I drew and inked it traditionally, and then I colored it in Clip Studio, which is like Photoshop,
Okay,
basically. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, it's
yeah. I have
don't
some
know if
experience of that from my indie books. I drew and color them. But then Mark told me, because he hired me because of a fan comic I drew 10 years ago, because I'd been drawing digital all these years, and I draw really squiggly. And he's
Okay.
like, I like this, but I'm not going to hire you for that style. Or he didn't say that, but that was kind of the idea. And then he saw the old stuff, and he's like, do something that looks like this. We'll do a book that looks like this. And I'm like,
Nice.
10 years. I'm like, how did I even do that? I was trying to reclaim it. And it was just going back to the tools kind of got me back in that zone. It was all like the 102 nib and a brush pen basically got the look back. You know?
Yeah, well, like I said in my tweet, I like that because I like seeing individuality, and that's another plea. It's like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I remember, like, for me, the golden age was late 60s, early 70s. I was a little kid turning into a teenager, and just the cornucopia of stuff, like all the different styles. There was no real set house style, I think. I mean, I was reading some Marvels more as the years went by, but DC Comics, looking at Showcase and all these different things, and just all the fantastic different art styles. I remember when I first saw, like, Walt Simonson did this comic Star Slammers in the back of one of the comics. I forget which one. And that just blew me away. And then there was Alex Nino, who did this Captain Fear comic in the back of one of the, I think one of the DC War comics. And when you're getting hit by all these art styles, it was just great. That's part of the charm of comics, is that's that personal touch. Whereas now I bemoan, or my complaint is, when you get too digital and too Photoshop, it's a bit too much, to me at least, to my perhaps aging eyes. You know, it's all the same. It's like I want to see, even if it's cruder, I want to see the person.
Yeah, I'm glad you had that reaction. I feel the same about if I'm looking at a comic shelf, you can instantly see what kind of pops out, and it might not even be like the best drawn, but it'll be a little bit different, and that's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's like a voice, right?
Uh-huh.
And so, speaking of voices, going back to Mr. X, I mean, back then we were just like, we were like on a wing and a prayer. We are just figuring out, because, you know, going back to this whole thing, like, there was no real indie publishing scene that was that big. There were a few different people. I don't have the comprehensive scope of it because I didn't see it even back then, again, because there wasn't an internet. But I know that people like Ken Stacy, who shared a studio, and Dean, they knew Mike Friedrich, who was doing this book called Star Reach that was like a anthology thing, I think. And then Bill Marks came along and was doing Vortex that we were doing Mr. X for. But there wasn't like this whole wide open thing, you know. And then at some point, well, I don't know, when did Ninja Turtles come in? That kind of blew things open, didn't it?
85?
Yeah.
That was later,
Well,
right?
And you know, real quick too, I left this page
Jungle
up
Book.
because this first panel. I'm waiting for it to get away. The first panel, second,
1984.
even third. These 2 pages look a lot to me like the intro for Batman the Animated Series. Do you
Yeah,
I see
You
it.
guys
Yeah.
see it too?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
I wonder if they referenced it or if it's even like a homage or something.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I did hear that they directly alluded to it. And I think I saw that somewhere. I don't know the citation, but Dark City, the film, I think they
I
said
was going to say that earlier, and then we got
Oh, nice.
like this is Dark City in a comic book. This,
Oh yeah.
Dark City is a great movie. Everybody, it's a movie that seems to be forgotten about, but it is.
Yeah. That's a cool one. It's same director as The Crow, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, it is. I didn't know that.
90s.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's a couple of good 90s movies. I have one thing to show for just kind of random, but one thing to discuss, then we'll kind of get out of here. But
Okay.
I did a local comic convention and there was a comic swap and a guy threw down a couple comics. He's like, I got some Frank Miller Daredevil. And I snatched up one of them and it's like 193. And I think like 191 was like the end of his Elektra run. So he actually quit writing in 192 and Larry Hama took over. So this is like the second Larry Hama one. And it's just a one-off adventure and it was really good. But there was this panel in it. So it says, he's a creep and probably a murderer, but I've got to save him. I'm like, yeah, that's a good little breakdown of like what a hero is that
Yeah.
is sort of forgotten. And because there's talk too of like, is it postmodern or not? Is it like reactionary? Is it meta? Is it deconstruction? But you can do like hip deconstruction and still have them be a hero like this, I think, too, even. But we don't even have that. They do like this, the deconstruction where if it was like if this was a modern comic, Daredevil would just kill him and be like,
I know.
creeps, only because he's a creep even too. If
Yeah, I
you're
was
a
gonna
creep.
say, murderer, yeah, I'd save him, but a creep, no way. I'm not saving a creep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Batman used to be he used to be more of a detective, right? Like many have pointed out, and he wouldn't kill people. I mean, that was just like he's just turned into a complete brute now. I can't even watch any of that stuff. It's just like
I got in trouble on Twitter today because I said there hasn't been a Batman movie yet.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
I've seen Batman where he talks them down too. And they used to do that in the animated series. Like he'll find a non-violent solution if he can. He'll give like characters like what they need kind of thing.
Well, not only that, Batman, in the comics and in the animated series, he wasn't a guy in armor that went and took out 40 guys.
no.
He's
Yeah.
super stealthy and brainy. But
Yeah.
what
And-
do
I mean, my thought is that again goes into this whole thing about the demise of heroes or a clear distinction, and it's been intentionally muddied. But we all have these kind of moments, like that might have been yours with the Daredevil panel. You have different moments that stand out when you're a kid and you're reading these things. Like for me, I think it was issue 5 of the New Gods, where there's a couple of them. One was where Orion in that issue was battling this sea creature. I don't know if you guys are all up on the New Gods by Jack Kirby, but Slig, and he's in this terrific battle, and he beats the crap out of him, and then he throws him off a cliff in the underground or wherever they were. And he's basically killing him, and that's pretty brutal. But he was never positioned as a Batman type character. What he was positioned as is a soldier in this hidden cosmic war, and Kirby balanced it because he had Light Ray. This is the great thing that made it work, for at least for me, when I would be reading this. He always had this wonderful counterpoint between Light Ray, who was the more thinker. He's still strong, but he was, I don't know, maybe more effeminate in a certain way, but he was a warrior in battle, but he was much more lighthearted. And he was always sort of pulling Orion back out of his messes. And so there's always this counterpoint, like where Light Ray was the thinker and Orion was the emotional brute who was just like go nuts on people. So I don't know, that was a time where there were more clearly defined heroes and villains. Now it's like the anti-hero, the triumph of the anti-hero. So
I don't even think these modern people working for the mainstream even know what a hero is.
No.
They don't know what a father is. Like Reed Richards, one of my favorite characters of all time. He's like the father figure of Marvel. And
Absolutely.
They write him to be a creep in him, or Daredevil wouldn't save him.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, there's no understanding of that because the people, that gets into the ideology. I guess the people behind it, they just either have no experience of it, they don't believe in that kind of traditional world
Yeah, it's weird
structure.
because it's like, is it subconscious for them? Because it would be weird if it was conscious. I don't even know how that works exactly.
It's hard to know how
They're
these things come, but because it's certainly not driven by the market and by sales, are they? Or I mean,
they've been stewed in a soup of the universities, and
yeah,
that critique of society, they're so immersed in it they don't know anything else, and the there's a correction happening, a slow correction happening, but they live and breathe that critique, and so they just it exudes from every pore, and they can't help themselves, and the only thing we can do is vote with our dollar.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. I
one thing
agree.
they want is like seal claps from their peers,
Hmm.
and that's like
Do
always
you,
a bad motivator, I think. Yeah.
do you think we're having a change in the mainstream? Like, do you think like I don't know. I keep thinking like now that U.S. aid is kaput, like will movies and comics go back to like market correction, or am I talking crazy?
You know what I heard Mark say that I think is kind of accurate is he said comics will kind of die, but that's almost a good thing because it will be only for nerds again.
Yeah,
And
it's
then it
funny that
will
you said
that will
that.
rejuvenate it and then it will be good again. But it'll take like that whole cycle will be like 10, 12 years or something.
It's funny that you said that because back in the 80s and 90s, my friend Jimmy and I loved the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and we were like, oh man, one day we're gonna go into a bar and the Chili Peppers, gonna... and then that happened, and now we hate the Chili Peppers. you know,
Yeah.
they got ruined by like everybody, like
You'd be
yeah.
surprised, yeah, what is like elevator music in malls and hotels now is like the punk music from like the
I
90s
know,
and
isn't it
80s.
astounding?
Yeah.
Me and my wife is the CBS 101 here in New York, and when I was a kid, that was Frank Sinatra, music. Now they actually played the Clash on CBS 101. I'm like, my
No, absolutely.
prayer.
It's
Hey,
bringing back.
Blink 182 is oldies music now.
I know.
I know, or for me, I was gonna say Blondie. The first time I heard the Blondie album, I came home. I was sharing an apartment back then with Ken Stacy and his girlfriend at the time, and I lived downstairs, and I came in the door, and he says, "Hey, Revo, listen to this," and he turns on Blondie, Heart of Glass, just like full volume, and it really had an impact, right? And then now again, it would probably be elevator music or something, but it was like revolutionary. It was just like just hit you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's. I remember Elvis Costello became classic rock. I'm like, this guy was like the poster child for new wave, and now he's classic rock.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I remember that too. Like in high school, Elvis Costello, and who was it? Kiss. There's some of my buddies were just completely into Kiss. I
Yeah.
did never appealed to me, but I guess all that stuff is old hat.
This was like a perfect blend of comic books and music. It was just like perfect for kids. And the funny thing is they wanted to be like taken seriously, like the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, and then they're like, "Well, I guess we're a kids band."
My favorite anecdote about Kiss is Paul Stanley was apparently a teacher, and they're like, well, why did you leave that secure gig to become a rock and roller? You say, because kids are so obnoxious. I just love that. And here he is making all these parents across America in the 70s worried about what are their kids listening to and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just funny.
That's awesome. We're gonna kind of wrap up, but one thing I want to promote also besides Heroic Tales 2 is Paul. They mentioned that you have a YouTube channel. I didn't realize that, so I definitely will be subscribing and checking it out. Can you tell us a little bit about that, though?
Yeah, so you can find me under Rocket Fiction. So it's become my sort of marquee or brand. So it's YouTube, whatever user, whatever it is on YouTube, Rocket Fiction. You can easily find it. Yeah, and I have mostly kind of art tutorial type things. I've got to develop it out more, but yeah, and I may do streaming. I've toyed with the idea, but I haven't really figured out what I want to do. I don't want to just be another guy streaming just to stream or something. But I mean, I find this very productive. So maybe this kind of format, group discussions. Anyway, yeah, I'm under Rocket Fiction. There's different playlists I've made of different videos, and again, mostly they relate to cartooning, art technique, live demonstrations of things. So
Cool. Yeah, Paul is a follower of your channel. He enjoys it a lot. The two Pauls, they find each other.
yeah, we have an informal worldwide club of Pauls.
How do I get in? I just got to change my name to Paul.
You're almost there. 3 more.
We're all
letters, 3 more
humans.
letters.
Me and all the Johns get together, but it's in porta potties across America.
Yeah.
As long as you're not Karens, that's the name. That's
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
You're clear.
And Jason, what can we promote for you? Is Jupiter still funding?
Yeah, so Jupiter is in demand on Fund My Comic and Indiegogo. I cracked 10K earlier this year, so I've got bragging rights on that. I am hard at work on issue 2. Issue 2, it should be launching sometime this year. I'm about 75% done with issue 2, so it will be launching this year. So please go check it out. And it's 40 pages full color, in demand, and order ship the following day.
Cool. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, we had 25 people kind of at the highest, about probably averaging 20 people watching, but thanks everyone for being here. Paulus
nice.
Arts for sure, the whole show chiming in, and we appreciate everyone's thoughts and questions and everything.
Can you show Paul that picture of my buddy cosplaying as Mr. X that I sent you?
Wait, do I have it?
I sent it to you on Twitter through the messages.
Oh, let me see.
Yeah, and while you do that, I'll just say hi to everybody in the chat that JJ and Crenshaw and different people, Paulus Arts. Yeah, so hi to everybody. Thanks for watching, and Per, thanks for having me on. That's fun. Hey, that's cool.
Yeah. Well,
That's
there we
fun.
go.
There you go.
He was the one when we were kids. He's like, you gotta get Mr. X, and then he looked like his favorite character.
Now that's a fan. There you go.
Yeah,
Cool.
That looks just like him. That's awesome.
I've been kind of turning into him myself. I've got to get some round glasses.
Oh yeah, you could do it almost.
Get
That's
lose
like a
weight.
fate, a kind of funny fate thing or something you would have never guessed.
This is my
Cool. So Heroic Tales 2, want to give us one more quick rundown, John?
Rogue Tales 2 is my love letter to Blue Sky Bronze Age comics, meaning it's a return to just classic superheroes. But I'm going to add conspiracy theories. Like I said, it's superheroes plus Dungeons and Dragons plus H.P. Lovecraft all mixed together. It was originally going to be an anthology, like inspired by Mr. X and Astro City, 2 of my favorite comics of all time. Put them in a blender and you get Heroic Tales. But now I'm going to put the Patriarch in his own comic, and every issue is going to have 2 stories, 2 complete stories, 2 covers. It's going to be a flip book going forward. And I think it's the best deal in crowdfunding right now. I don't like that you got to spend $25 and then wait 9 months for a completion of a story, if that. So every issue is going to be complete 2 stories. So think of it, it's $5 a story. Best deal in crowdfunding. 2 covers.
Oh yeah, that is good. And Renzo is a great artist.
Yeah,
That's a lot of fun.
you can scroll down, you can see some of the interior art. I got Daniel De La Silva. He's going to be the colorist for the Patriarch, and then Oscar is going to be the colorist for everything else. This is Martina Marcoda. I sent her a picture of her my T-shirt. And I said, "Would you pose to help me sell T-shirts?" And then everybody's like, "You got to make that a cosplay cover."
Nice. I like the cosplay angle. The Common America people do that. I'm gonna try that eventually on a comic.
Yeah. So
At the convention I did this past weekend, there wasn't even that big of a comic scene. The cosplay scene was insane, and it was all ages. And I'm like, then they don't buy comics either. A lot of the cosplay people. I'm like, how do we just need to get the cosplay audience? Then we'll make a ton of money. But.
right, yeah. So these are some interior pages. I just had the interior recolored. I think there was just a little language barrier between myself and Daniel, so it's so much better. So always improving.
Cool.
And then if you scroll down, you can see some of the Mary Sue stories. The tagline for Mary Sue is, "Where do you go when you're already perfect?" So I'm
I like
goofing on
that.
the concept of a Mary Sue. So this is a perfect girl. She's a 401 PhDs. She's a good girl, and oops, now she has the ultimate power. So the consequences of being perfect. These are T-shirts that you could buy, original artwork, a pint glass.
Yeah.
You were talking.
Cool.
You know what? That Mr. X beer would have been delicious.
Oh
There you
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, the beer. Some of there's these funny little ideas. That would be so great to have a beer can.
I'm waiting to find out if Mary Sue's kryptonite is her bad choice in men. We'll see.
Oh, that's funny that you should say that.
Yeah.
I hinted at that in the story. There's a hint about future angles. Let's just say that there'll be a love triangle with a fan favorite character that I introduced, King Fu, the world's greatest martial artist and Elvis impersonator.
Oh, that sounds great. Nice. That he needs a spin-off of his own comic.
Yeah, everybody loves
already.
Yeah, so I'm excited about this. This is a lot of fun making it. It's going to come out. You know, it's already it's. I paid issue number 2 is paid for with the money from issue number 1. So what we're really trying to do is raise funds for issue number 3. You know, I'm doing it the opposite of everybody else. Everybody else raises the money and then makes the comic. Well, I'm making the comic, you know, with the money that I made, because I laid out the money for the first one. I'm a construction worker. I'm not a full-time comic book guy. So I paid out of pocket, and now going forward, by the time I launch a campaign, that comic is already paid for and will be made. So, you know, a little bit of a guarantee there, because I know some other bad behavior by crowdfunders has hindered the rest of us who, you know.
Yeah.
I had people like, I don't crowdfund anymore because I've been burnt. I'm like, I'm sorry.
I'm the same way with Jupiter. I'm not going to launch I didn't launch the campaign for the first one until it was 90% done. Same thing for issue 2.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, exactly.
That's wise. It's really wise.
You know, but then again, you know, I'm not a full-time artist. You know what I mean? So I know some guys, they're not going to put 6 months worth of work and then hope it sells.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Cool. Go ahead. Because I was going to my wrap.
There's the Renzo covers. Both Renzo artwork are in one comic because it's a flip book, and then the other one is Josh Howard and Jose Garcia. So I call it the Josh Jose variant, and then the Renzo variant.
Yeah, get all 4, everyone. But the Jose one, we got a shout out from Crenshaw. Jose's great.
Jose was in the chat earlier.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Great. He worked so fast. He colored it and drew it so fast. He's
I know. I don't know what his deal is.
He's not human.
Yeah. He makes me depressed.
He has Mr. X's overnight serum, all night serum.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Somnolin.
But yeah, so Paul, thanks so much for being on. That was a great discussion.
I'm glad. Yeah. Well, it's great seeing all 3 of you and you know, getting to know you a bit. And Per, thank you for the invitation. Yeah, let's do something again and just chat about whatever. But yeah.
I agree. Yeah, we should. And yeah, because if you're thinking about streaming, you could be a guest here and there, and then then people see you. You can launch your own stream or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent.
But cool. Yeah. So thanks. And chat, thanks for being here, everyone.
And Henry, thanks for the link there. Henry Bemis in the chat. The links.
Yeah. And sub Paul's YouTube. And yeah, we'll be back later. Everyone keep posted. I got Creative Block on my or it's not on my channel on Thursday, but Creative Block is this Thursday. And yeah, I do some random art stuff or whatever on my channel here and there. But cool. All right, I'm going to click the button now. This is if I don't even have outro videos yet, so I click it.
That's no problem.
I click
All right,
the
take care, everybody.